Hi, my name is Skylar Stasny, and I'm the curator of Capitol Home at the History Museum. Welcome to Insights in History. In my presentation today, I will be comparing past and present Christmas traditions and exploring their origins. Today I will be talking about different Christmas traditions and the history behind them. So the Christmas traditions that we enjoy today are scarcely more than 100 years old. In the colonial era, people celebrated in many different ways. It was essentially a manner of their heritage. So Germans had Christmas trees, and Puritans mainly ignored it because Christmas wasn't celebrated in the Bible. The wealthy often drank and caroused and recreated what they perceived was done in England. Christmas didn't really become what we think of today until around the mid-1800s. After the Revolution, there was the turbulence of the Civil War and rising industrialism, so the nation was rapidly changing. And as a reaction to the nation changing, there was a change in perceived traditions and values. So the idea of Christmas as a home holiday with your family started then. At the same time, there was an increasingly rapid exchange of information that meant that these traditions began to homogenize. So there were telegraphs, newspapers, magazines, and railroads that brought urban and wealthy practices to everybody. One of the most prominent shared traditions was the Christmas tree. It was a staple in German homes, and Americans began taking to the trees in the 1830s and 40s. But it was the British royalty that really caused it to take off. Queen Victoria's mother and grandmother, both German-born, erected Christmas trees at Windsor Castle. But Victoria's was depicted in the Illustrated London News in 1848, which boosted its popularity. By 1900, 1 in 4 homes in the US would have Christmas trees. And this is the picture that was featured in that magazine. So what did that Victorian tree look like? This is a picture of the Eberhart House on Race Street in 1896 or 1897. And the tree itself was usually fir, sometimes spruce, but could also be pine, and it usually wasn't very tall. You would want the branches to be far apart so that the candles that were in the tree would be less likely to light the entire tree on fire. And decorations were often handmade, so they're usually dolls or popcorn garlands or paper ornaments, and some of those could be found in magazines. So this is another example of that Victorian Christmas tree. This is a picture of Ruth Mildred Cuss in her family home on Michigan Street in 1903, and you can see that there is more of the handmade ornaments and some of the garland like we saw on the last tree. And here are just a couple more examples of that Victorian Christmas tree. So you can see some of the popcorn garland in the picture on the left, which is the home of Hester Busby. And on the right is a photo of Miss Elizabeth Blair, and that's in 1917, and she is the daughter of Donna Eberhart. So in both of these pictures, you can kind of see the different ways that people decided to decorate their trees with a wide variety of ornaments. So this is an example of what a wealthier person's tree would have looked like, and believe that it has electric lights in it. So this is probably similar to what the Olivers would have had in their own home. And as you can see, there are a lot of different types of ornaments on this tree, and some of those include glass ornaments, which were mass-produced at the time. And these would have been in a variety of colors and shapes that they would have been able to access. And it was also popular to have wax angels with glass wings or wooden ornaments or tin cutouts, and we'll see those a little bit closer on the next slide. So as you can see here, there are several different types of ornaments, so you get to see a little bit more of the details here for some of those. And you can see here that the garland isn't handmade like on some of the other trees that we've looked at, and that there are also some other different types of ornaments that we haven't seen yet. So the first type of artificial tree was a feather tree, and they were called that because they were made out of goose feather and dyed green, and they were wrapped with wire around a dowel and spaced far apart. And this is an example of a goose feather tree. This is one that we have in our collection, and this picture is in the library of the mansion from a few years ago. So this is the library of the mansion when it was decorated for Christmas in the 1940s. This is the only picture that we have of the house when it's decorated for Christmas. And you can see the tree in the back window here. And this is a close-up of that tree in the library, so you can see some of the ornaments. There are some electric lights here, and if you look at the ornaments closely, you can see that they are glass ornaments. So electric lights weren't widely used at this time. They could be found in places like the White House or in public displays during the 1890s, and they had to be specially crafted and strung by an electrician. And this cost the modern equivalent of thousands of dollars. But they became available to the public in around 1903. So this is an example of what most people had to light their trees. So this would be the tree in the den over at the mansion, and as you can see, we have candle lights that are in the tree, which would have been similar to what most people during the Victorian era would have done for their tree decorations. Not only do we have traditions for decorating, but we also have different traditions for receiving gifts. So this is a picture of a monk named Saint Nicholas, and he was the protector of children and sailors, and his feast day is on December 6th. And on that day, usually children would get presents. So in the Netherlands, the Dutch children put out a clog that was filled with hay and a carrot for St. Nicholas's horse. And on St. Nicholas Day, gifts were tagged with humorous rhymes that were written by the sender. In the United States, there's a custom associated with St. Nicholas Day that children leave their shoes in the foyer on December 5th in hopes that St. Nicholas will place some coins on the soles of their shoes. Another popular tradition at this time was the Bellschnickel. He came from a German-speaking tradition of a crotchety old man in a brown coat and a fur hat who carried a switch. He was also called Kris Kringle. He would give good children cakes or candies and beat the bad children with a switch. This is an excerpt from Harper's Magazine, and it is a poem called An Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clarke Moore, and it was published in 1823. And this poem is what made Santa as we know him now, a very jolly old elf, portly with a sleigh and reindeer with presents for children. And this idea of Santa was merged with some other traditions, such as the Jultomten in Scandinavia. And this tradition talks about a person who is depicted as a corpulent figure with red clothes and a long white beard, and it's very similar to how we view Santa now. So these are a couple of examples of what Santa looked like during the Victorian era, and as you can see, these two are different from our normal depiction of Santa. So if you look at the man on the left, he's wearing a fur coat and fur hat with a long white beard. And the one on the right is more similar to how we view Santa now, with the white trim around the cap and the coat. And in this picture, it's actually kind of funny because the donkey that the little girl is riding on is actually completely taxidermied. So it's one of those pictures that is a little bit different from what we would think of as a nice Christmas picture now. And these are just two more examples of what Santa looked like during the Victorian era. they were kind of going through a different mishmash of looks until they settled on what we know today. So you can see in this picture on the left, these two kids are really excited to see Santa, and he has a very large head, and it's actually a costume. So there's actually a man inside of that being Santa Claus. And this picture on the right kind of reminds me more of the Belschnickel that we mentioned earlier, because it looks like he has a switch with him in that picture. So this is the first modern Santa image that we have. It was done in 1881 by political cartoonist Thomas Nast. And this is the idea that we have of the red suit with the white trim, Santa having a workshop, his elves, and Mrs. Claus. And Santa also became an idealized version of a late 1800s capitalist icon. He held a monopoly on Christmas gifts with his manufacturing empire that had reliable elf labor, working long hours in the selfless pursuit of making goods. But Santa, unlike most robber barons, gave away all of his product to children at the end of the year. And here you can see some of these Santas that we use to decorate the mansion. So in the mansion, we try to use multiple types of Santas to show different ways that he's looked over time. So you see the modern variation of Santa as well as some of the ways that he looked during the Victorian era. And this way we can show that different traditions were celebrated throughout history. Thank you for joining me today. This presentation has been part of our Insights in History series, a monthly program of the History Museum. See you next time.